Years ago, I used to listen to a self-help podcast every morning while getting ready for work and then also in the car during my morning commute. In that season, I felt like I needed this podcast to become a better version of myself. It was, in many respects, my guilty pleasure. Now, the podcast host was rambunctious and would often yell at listeners or yell about their situation or their decisions. I'm sure the podcast host did this for entertainment purposes, and maybe perhaps some of this was just their natural personality. But I listened to this podcast day in and day out, and I felt again like, I needed to hear this type of tough love treatment in order to become a better version of myself. And then one day I realized that I did not have to listen to a person raising their voice, yelling, and displaying other questionable behavior in order to make changes in my life. I didn't have to be spoken harshly to. I didn't have to listen to this person speak harshly to others in order to improve. But then I began to ask myself, at what point in my life did I come to believe that it was okay to be scolded in order to be corrected or in order to make change? What happened in my life that I became desensitized to this sort of communication or this sort of behavior? Hi, everyone. This is the PR Whisperer, and I'm a public relations coach and advisor. I work with leaders to help deliver their message, to help them deliver their message more effectively and to gain attention for their work. In this commentary, I view things from the perspective of, PR, but I also view and comment on issues from the perspective of faith. And so you'll get a little bit of both in my commentary. If you've not already subscribed, please do so and you'll receive a notification whenever I post a new video. So back to this question of, what happened in my life that I thought it was okay to listen to someone yell in order to help other people do better, in order to help me do better. And that question haunted me. Here's where I landed. Sometimes we can become so desperate for change that we will do anything or accept anything to achieve it. We may spend a lot of money for coaching courses. We may listen to podcasts and YouTube videos, or we may even go to seminars. And while I do think that we have to put in the work to make change, I also want to caution us when we get to a point that we will accept anything in order to get what we want. When we get desperate, we can numb our senses and we can put ourselves in a vulnerable situation. Now, this question of, what happened in my life to make me think that this sort of a communication was appropriate, it's something that I still think about. And it was particularly resonant for me when I have heard and when I hear about the behavior of certain gospel recording artists and certain Christian leaders. I'm thinking right now about Juanita Bynum and Kim Burrell. Both have gone viral in recent days, and I don't particularly follow either one of them, but I have been paying attention to the many instances when Kim Burrell has gone viral based on something that she said or, how she has treated the people who were in the audience. And there are a couple things that I have drawn from these situations and from prior controversy, and I just wanted to share those. So first, I want us to appreciate that loud isn't always right. Sometimes when people have, big personalities and they're very loud, sometimes we can think that that is the only way, and it's not. The other thing that, comes up for me is that we can learn and we can grow without people berating us or being mean to us. And when I think about my own life experience, I don't know about you, but for me, when I make mistakes, I don't hear God telling me or handling me harshly. I don't feel God saying things like you're a loser or you're worthless or you're trash. That's not the character of God. God is loving, even when exacting consequences, or even when we have to suffer the consequences of our action. I still feel like we have a loving God. And I don't feel like, when I do something wrong and I know I need to make change, I don't feel like God seeks to destroy my sense of self or my spirit. Because that is not how God operates, that's not something that I will accept from other people. There is a difference between conviction and condemnation. And certainly if you are a Christian, you've heard of these terms. Condemnation makes you feel hopeless. Like, what's the use in trying? I'll never get it right. I might as well give up. Condemnation is like a cloud and it is oppressive. Conviction makes you feel like what I did was wrong and I have to do better, or I need to develop a new strategy to navigate this or that issue going forward. Conviction prompts you to change, but it doesn't destroy your sense of self. It doesn't leave you feeling utterly hopeless. And so whenever I hear people speaking or teaching, if I sense a strong sense of condemnation, I know immediately this is not someone who I should listen to. If I sense conviction in that, okay, you know what, you could do better. But conviction that doesn't attack the essence of who I am, that's someone who I might want to continue listening to. And I would encourage all of us to think about it from, that perspective. Does the feedback feel oppressive, or does it inspire me to want to do better? And if you find yourself drawn to people who are harsh with you, or people who are just downright mean, some of what Kim Burrell has been accused of doing in the past, it strikes me as just mean. When you are up in an audience, or when you are up before an audience and you're talking about whether or not you've determined people to be ugly, or whether or not, how you don't want to be too common, or you don't want to, you need to do credit checks or background on your friends. That just strikes me as mean, because in those situations, all of us, or many of us, can relate to being in a position in life that we don't feel good about, right? We can relate to being in a position where we felt like we've struggled, or where we have made some financial mishaps. And that should never be used as fodder for people to beat you down, whether jokingly or serious. It's still not kind. So, she is particularly someone who I will pray for, but I will never listen to, because I just don't feel much love there. Now, I don't know her. I could be wrong, but I'm just saying what comes up for me when I hear about these viral moments involving Kim Burrell. I also had to think about, when I was listening to this podcast, I had to think about, okay, well, how do I want to receive information? Particularly first thing in the morning, or even, in the evening. What is the first thing that I want to hear? And I realized that for me, the first thing that I want to hear are things that are loving, things that affirm who I am, things that give me encouragement, things that point me back to my relationship with God. I don't need to hear anyone beating me down. Even when I think about, again, the times when I've made mistakes and the times that I've gotten feedback from people to whom I'm accountable from, I've had people accountable to, excuse me. I've had people speak directly and speak lovingly to me and still give me, a word that maybe was difficult to hear, but it helped me over the long term. But it was never mean-spirited. It was never meant to bring me down or make me feel bad about myself. In closing, what I want us to remember is that we don't have to have people beat us down or belittle us to make change. And if you're listening to someone, even if they're not beating you down, but they're beating other people down, like, I don't think that that's good for you either. So if you find yourself in this position, I want you to know that there is another way, that you can be held accountable without someone attacking the essence of who you are. In 2024, you do not have to sit through harassment, regardless of where it is. And if you're listening to someone and you feel, I don't care if you're in church or if you're listening to a podcast, if you're around family, what have you, if you feel shame, if you feel an overwhelming sense of fear, if you feel like your sense of self is shattered, don't ignore those feelings. You can hear the truth, a truth that may be hard to swallow, and still not feel like your sense of self has been attacked. You don't have to allow people to abuse you, regardless of what their title is, in order for you to grow. Again, when I think about what I want to hear and who I want to learn from, I look for people who have a sense of humility, people who are teachers. And when I say teachers, I mean that your encounters with them leave you feeling smarter, more empowered than maybe before, and hopeful. And then finally, I want to listen to people who make me feel like positive change is possible. Now, you may say, okay, well, how will I improve if I only look for fluff? And what I would say is this is not fluff. I also think that when it's time for us to make change in our lives, we will receive that message over and over and over, and possibly from different sources. So you will be compelled to change, and you'll be compelled to change, and not necessarily by someone who is cruel to you or someone who is mean-spirited. Finally, I'll just say this. If you are someone who has found yourself in several situations where you feel like you're being exposed or you're being invited to make change, I just want to remind us all that, if we are not working on the shadow aspects of ourselves, and those are the aspects that we need to grow in, those are the aspects that may not be readily apparent, at least not initially. But if you find yourself in this situation where you're constantly being challenged and encouraged to change, take a moment to do that. Sometimes when we have character flaws, especially the larger your platform becomes, or the more impact or influence you have, it can be tempting to think that you can gloss over misbehavior with one PR tactic or one PR stunt after another. And that is simply not the case. Even a string of positive publicity will not help someone who constantly finds themselves in the position of being exposed, or someone who's in one scandal or one negative viral moment after the other. To me, that is a signal that there needs to be deeper work on the individual. And it's only after that deeper work occurs that the person can, I think, begin to have a different experience with the people with whom they interact with. So thanks so much for listening. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please be sure to do so.